So in this video I want to clarify clipping paths, and I want to show you a little bit about clipping paths that are built into files, a la the really sort of higher level professional clip art that you can buy. So we see inside of Photoshop, here's a professional level clip art. I can tell because the quality of it is very, very good. There's no color casts. You can see it's very sharp. You can also see that it's shot against a white background, which makes it really good for basically shooting against white. And if you look very carefully inside a Photoshop file that has clipping paths, you'll click on the Paths menu. And if you can't see a Paths menu in Photoshop, you need to click on the window rather to activate it. And you can see that there's a clipping path that's saved. What a clipping path is simply a path drawn with the pen tool, a Bezier path, a vector path that says to Photoshop and any other program that's opening this Photoshop file, please pay attention to the area that's inside of that path and ignore anything that's outside of that path. So there's two that are saved with this particular version of it. The one that I'm going to focus on is the one that came with the file, and that's the outline. So if I click on outline, you'll see, and it's kind of hard to see because it's very, very light, but you'll see if you click on it that there's this path that's been drawn around the artwork, and it gets saved with the artwork. In the previous video, you saw how that path how it can be activated inside of InDESIGN when you bring it into there, or if you bring it into Illustrator or some other program. So that's really what a clipping path is. Now I'm going to show you how to make one. I made one for one of the other classes, but I'm going to make one again just to show you, in case you have artwork that does not have a clipping path. So I'm going to delete the one that I did before. And what I'm going to do for this clipping path is take the pen tool, and I want to click and drag. I'm going to make the assumption that you have some experience with Illustrator and working with the pen tool. I'm going to do this very quickly, so I'm not going to be super accurate. I'm going to trace the shadow for this one a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to finish up the path here. So if you don't know how to use the pen tool, the Bezier tool from Illustrator, you need to really learn that skill. It's a skill that we use time and time again in the world of graphic communications. So I've got that set up. I've got the path here. And what you'll see is it creates something called a work path. A work path just means that it's a path that we started. It has not yet been saved. It can be deleted. So in order to save this path, on the spill out menu in Photoshop's path palette, I'm going to click and select Save Path. It's going to ask me to name this path, and I'll call it Ball and Shadow. And you'll see now it appears in this list. It can be clicked off. I can go to just the outline of the 8-ball and click off of it, and I can click on Ball and Shadow, and you can see that it's been traced for the ball and shadow. Now, you get to pick one of these paths to save with the JPEG file. I'm going to select the ball and shadow this time around, since in the last video we used the one that was supplied with the artwork, the outline. And what I'm going to do while that is selected, I'm going to go underneath the spill out menu. And remember, we've already saved this path, so it's got a name. I'm going to make it a clipping path. And it says, well, which of these paths do you want to make the clipping path? We say ball and shadow. And then there's a flatness setting. Now, flatness has to deal with anything that's vector, and it deals with how basically segmented the path can look, or the contents of the path can look. So I've been telling students, if a half pixel, maybe device pixel to 1 pixel is a really good starting point. And if you notice it's not meeting your needs, you can go up or down. So I'm going to click OK. And you'll see ball and shadow, if I click off of it, is bolded. It's hard to see, but it's slightly bolder than outline, meaning that this is currently the clipping path that's going to get saved with this JPEG file. I would, by the way, encourage you to save as a Photoshop file instead. Photoshop file saves much more detail, and it can enable multiple things, multiple channels, and multiple paths. But we're going to save this right now. says Pro JPEG. We're going to go back into InDesign. We've got our artwork. We're going to do the placing. I'm going to click on the Pro Art. Remember, we've already clicked options in our last video to show the import options. And so I can click open, and it says apply the Photoshop clipping path. You can see that this one, has the shadow around it versus the other one. I'll click OK. I'll click and drag here to create the ball shape, and you can see it's now placed with that shadow. So that's the basics on creating a clipping path inside of Photoshop, and then showing you how to import it. In this case, in InDesign, it can also be brought into Adobe Illustrator.